who gave the orders. No one asks about the crime.
All right, folks, we are live. It's the Info Warrior. We have a very special show tonight. We have Jim Mars in studio. How you doing, Jim?
All right, Jason. It's great to be with you.
It's great to have you. And what's really exciting is I was just telling him, you know, I grew up watching him on the History Channel and other things, and I continue to watch his stuff. I just saw him in 2012.
Yeah, it made me feel real old.
Well, it should make you feel really established because you are one of the most familiar faces in this entire movement, in the alternative media in general. And some of your work is the best work out there. I had my buddy just this summer saying, man, I'm reading this Rule by Secrecy by this guy named Jim Mars. I'm like, yeah, I've met Jim several times. It's really good information. He's like, really? Is it all true? And I'm like, well, you know, he does his best and he gets a lot of great information. And he has really been at the forefront of showing, you know, connections between UFOs, secret societies, martial law, the Nazis, the current administration, the elites. I mean, you name it, you've covered it.
Well, you mentioned Rule by Secrecy. Let me just tell you this, Jason. With all of the massive amount of information in there, I have only gotten one criticism, one critique, one au contraire, and that had to do with when I quoted a letter from George Washington stating that no one who was more convinced of the fact than he that the philosophies of the Illuminati had not spread to North America. Mm-hmm. And the man who got in touch with me didn't argue with the content of the letter. I had said it was from a 1796 letter, and he said no, it was a 1798 letter.
Oh, how dare you?
Okay. Well, but I'll tell you, he actually sent me a copy of the handwritten letter. Okay. And okay, I'm willing to say maybe I got the date 2 years off, but then I looked at it. I just looked at it recently again, and you know, that old scrawly writing, you can barely, I still have trouble trying to figure out what that date was. Mm-hmm. But the only criticism, the only objection I got to anything in Rule of Secrecy was the date on the letter. He didn't object to the thrust and content of the letter, which was that George Washington acknowledged that the Illuminati were active in the North America. See, of course, if I go out and try to talk to some of my friends and mention the Illuminati, then they roll their eyes and say, oh, you know, well, that doesn't exist. What are you talking about? You know, but hey, George Washington bought into it.
Not only bought into it, but we know that it did exist at some point.
Sure.
Weishaupt, whether he was the real originator of it and his principles, he definitely brought it into the light so that they were persecuted and supposedly wiped out.
Right.
But
and I suspect that Weishaupt was probably operating on behalf of somebody else. He was a front man.
Yeah, he does seem a lot like he was just a front man. And again, exactly, front men, and all of a sudden they're gone, but they say they'll come back after another name. What really, I think, spells it out for me is that they're a do-as-thou-wilt group.
Right.
Any means necessary.
Right.
And you look throughout history, and history, especially large events, whether it be, you know, World War I, 9/11, are started by these false flag type events where they actually take out citizens, and then they clamor to those citizens and say something must be done. And this is their strategy again and again and again.
That's where they have abused the Hegelian dialectic. George Hegel was a German philosopher. Back about the Age of Enlightenment, he came up with a fairly simple formula for identifying human discourse and how we handle things, okay? In other words, so if you want to go see one movie, that's a thesis. That's your thesis. I want to go see this movie. If I want to go see another movie, then that's antithesis or the antithesis. And then so we have a problem there, okay? And so then we have a solution, which is synthesis, okay? So it's problem, reaction, solution. And basically just that's what happens. And what we do is we'd flip a coin or we'd do something and work it out. Then we go see movie C, right? Mm-hmm. That we could both agree to.
We got to take a break right now. We're going to come back with Jim Mars. We're going to take your phone calls as well. It's the Info Warrior with Jason Bermas, PrisonPlanet.tv, Infowars.com.
Paranoia strikes deep into your life, it will create.
All right, folks, we are back. It's the Info Warrior. We have Jim Mars. And remember, we're going to be taking your calls. So, if you've read a Jim Mars book, you've seen a Jim Mars lecture, you just saw 2012, which you're featured in. It's a recent film from Disinformation. Please give us a call. This is an open forum for questions. This is just a pleasure for me. Now, you were talking about the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution.
Right. And so that, this came from George Hegel. And it was just kind of an outline of how humans resolve their differences, neither good nor bad. The people, though, who are trying to lord it over us, they took it one step further. They said, why wait for a problem? Let's create the problem and then offer a draconian solution. And when everybody goes, oh, no, wait a minute, we can't do that. Well, then we'll back off a step or two. But we'll still basically get what we wanted in the first place. And this is exactly what they do. One example, for example, was the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building. And right after that, they all started talking up the militias and the Patriot movement and how dangerous that was. And, we can't have that. And so there was legislation put forth in anti-militia, anti-terrorist legislation, even back during the Clinton years. But everybody, said, wait a minute, we don't want to give up all our liberties. And so they softened it down and they cut parts out of it. But they still went ahead and passed some. And it was just another step towards where we are today, where now they're telling you can't grow a garden and you gotta put numbers on all your ammo. And if you don't, you're a criminal. And they're now, they've been building these FEMA concentration camps. And that's not me talking. That's not Jim Mars. I'm not calling them concentration camps. The Attorney General, under George W. Bush, the first guy, he called them concentration camps and said, yeah, this is what we need to do. John Ashcroft, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he called them concentration camps. Well, of course, and everybody goes, concentration camps, oh my God, we can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And they've hassled around over that for a few years. Well, now we got Obama in, and now they've actually got legislation legitimizing and legalizing these concentration camps. Mm-hmm. And it's just going right over everybody's head because you don't hear this reported in the corporate mainstream media.
Well, the big story today over at Prison Planet was this thing in Schenectady, martial law. Now, this is the county over from where I went to high school.
Right.
Okay. Now, can we bring up the map, guys, for prisonplanet.tv? I want to show people how it works.
Well, while you're bringing that up, let me point out that we are still under the Posse Comitatus law.
Yeah.
Which was passed in 1879, which says quite clearly that you cannot use the military to police the U.S. civilian population. Nobody has rescinded that law. Nobody has, voted it out or whatever. They have just ignored it. And this gets down to a very important part, Jason, because we're either a nation of law or we're a lawless nation. And when whoever's in power decides they can do whatever they want to, and that becomes the legal law of the day, then we are a lawless nation.
Well, we are. I mean, there's no doubt about it in my mind. I mean, the GIVE Act just passed, and that is basically calling for mandatory service of high school students, college students, and then if you get out of high school, because in Obama's fake State of the Union, he actually said that the reason the country's not doing so well is because of all the high school dropouts. He said it's no longer an option. Okay, and he kind of demonized them for why our country was, it's not that we've shipped all the jobs out, that we accept second and third world labor. It's not that, we don't create anything here anymore. It's not that we let the Federal Reserve take over. It's not any of that. It's the high school dropouts.
It's all the high school dropouts. But, there is a problem with high school dropouts. These are young men and women, and they're in the prime of their life. They got a lot of adrenaline running through them and a lot of estrogen and everything else. And the authorities worry about people like that just on the streets. They may form Al-Qaeda cells.
Yeah, how dare they?
They may actually go out and demonstrate and do something.
Yeah, they're not so docile.
Exactly.
They're not all fluoridated.
This was all written down back in the early 60s in the report from Iron Mountain, which they claim was some kind of fake, but I'm now pretty convinced it was not. Henry Kissinger worked on that, by the way, and the whole idea was they were trying to figure out, because Kennedy wanted to end the Cold War, and so they were studying, well, what are we going to do to keep the economy going to replace war? And basically what they came up with is there's really nothing else to replace it with, because when you have a war, then you conscript all these young people and you put them in a military force, and then you control them and guide them and turn them into good little automatons, and then they're good little citizens, and you don't have to worry about them being out on the street and objecting to your military adventures. Okay, so and here we are. Except there's still such a resistance to the draft that now they're just going to draft the high schoolers, right?
It's not only that, but there's basically saying if you don't do college out of high school, and even if you do, you got to do 100 hours of community service a year. This is for every college student. I'm thinking to myself, what, do they get caught drinking downtown underage, or, with a little bit of marijuana? What is this? This is mandatory now. And then they say, well, you'll have to be in a new social program run by one of our new bureaucracies then. A secondary school, kind of like a BOCES after high school. You're going to learn a trade. They're going to make it seem glamorous.
Well, as Newsweek said on the cover here a couple of weeks ago, now we're all socialist. This is the Hitler Youth. This is the little young communist league. Yeah, there it is. We're all socialists now, so we all, the only difference. Well, no, I started to say the only difference is they won't be wearing some little uniform.